This story is a work of fiction. All characters, locations, military units, and events are entirely imaginary. This story is intended for entertainment purposes only. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from, and if this story stays with you, consider subscribing for more like it. The call came at 3:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. Caleb Dunn was underneath a rusted-out flatbed trailer, welding a cracked crossmember, when his phone lit up on the workbench 6 feet away. He let it ring. The arc sputtered against corroded steel. Ranger lifted his head from the shop doorway, watched the phone, then watched Caleb. The phone stopped, started again. Caleb killed the torch, pushed himself out from under the trailer on a creeper that had lost one wheel sometime last winter. His lower back seized when he sat up. 44 years old, and his spine remembered every wave the SOCR boats had slammed through on the Tigris. He picked up the phone. Unknown number with a Corbin Bend area code. Dunn Metalworks. Mr. Dunn, this is Garrett Lyle. I'm an attorney here in town. I'm calling regarding the estate of Colonel Wesley Pace, United States Navy, retired. Caleb's hand tightened on the phone. He did not sit down. What about him? Colonel Pace passed away 9 days ago. Heart failure. He named you as sole beneficiary of his estate. Ranger stood, not quickly. The dog's body went rigid in the doorway, ears forward, weight shifting onto his front legs. He stared at Caleb, not at the phone, at Caleb, as if the name had traveled through the speaker and landed somewhere the dog could smell. I haven't spoken to Pace in 11 years. I'm aware of that, Mr. Dunn. The colonel was quite specific. The estate includes 3 properties, a financial account, and the chapel bridge. There is one condition attached to the inheritance. What condition? The bridge is to be maintained, as it is. No modifications, no inspections by third parties. The colonel's words, not mine. Caleb looked at Ranger. The dog had not moved, had not relaxed. 80 pounds of German Shepherd locked in place like a compass needle finding north. Tell Lyle I'm not interested. He said it to the dog, not to the phone. The phone he held for 3 more seconds before hanging up. The refusal felt clean, simple. He had no interest in anything Wesley Pace had left behind. Pace had left plenty behind already. None of it had been worth keeping. Ranger stayed in the doorway, his body eased by fractions, first the shoulders, then the jaw, then a long exhale through his nose that fogged the concrete floor. He lowered himself back down, chin on pause, eyes open. Caleb set the phone on the workbench, picked up the torch, did not turn it on. Wesley Pace, Commander, Naval Special Warfare Support Activity. Caleb's CO for 4 years, 3 deployments, and 1 night on the Shat al-Arab waterway that had ended a friendship and started a silence that lasted more than a decade. The phone rang again at 4:12. Garrett Lyle's office occupied the 2nd floor of a limestone building on Main Street, 3 doors down from the post office. The brass plate by the entrance read Lyle and Associates, though Caleb saw no evidence of associates. The waiting room held 2 leather chairs, a water dispenser, and a framed photograph of Corbin Bend's riverfront circa 1940. No receptionist. Lyle met him at the inner door. 58, trim, silver hair parted with precision. Dark blue suit that cost more than the flatbed trailer Caleb had been welding that morning. Handshake firm, practiced, the grip of a man who measured people by how they entered a room. "Mr. Dunn, thank you for coming in. I said I wasn't interested. You also drove 40 minutes to tell me that in person. Please, sit down." "I'll stand." Lyle nodded once. He did not argue. He walked behind his desk and opened a folder. The gesture was smooth, unhurried, calibrated to suggest that standing clients were a common and unremarkable occurrence. Caleb did not believe that for a second. Ranger entered the office without waiting. He circled the room once, stopped at the door behind Lyle's desk, and lay down across the threshold. 80 pounds of obstruction. Lyle looked at the dog, then at Caleb. His smile thinned by 1 degree. He can stay there. He will. Lyle opened a folder. Cream-colored pages, legal text, the colonel's signature at the bottom of each in black ink. Caleb did not reach for them. Lyle turned the folder and slid it across the desk. The estate is substantial. 3 properties in the county. A brokerage account valued at approximately $600,000. And the bridge. Caleb's eyes stopped on the number. 600,000 was not what a retired Navy colonel accumulated on a pension and a good stock portfolio. 600,000 was something else. Where did the money come from? The colonel had private investments, real estate primarily. He was a shrewd man. He was a commander when I served under him. When did he make colonel? After your time together, I believe. He retired at that rank. Caleb read. The language was dense, layered with clauses that redirected attention like a card dealer redirecting eyes. But the structure was clear. Everything to Caleb Dunn. 1 condition. The bridge. He found it on page 4. The colonel's own words, inserted as a rider. The chapel bridge is to remain as it is. It is to be maintained, but not altered. No structural inspection shall be conducted by any party other than the beneficiary. This condition is binding and irrevocable. No inspections by third parties. The colonel was eccentric about that bridge. He considered it a historical monument. Eccentric. His word, not mine. Lyle smiled, controlled. A smile designed to close the conversation. Caleb closed the folder. Ranger had not moved from the doorway. His body blocked the exit behind Lyle's chair completely. The attorney glanced back at the dog again. "I'll think about it." "Of course. Take whatever time you need." Though I should mention, the colonel specified a 30-day window for acceptance. After that, the estate transfers to a secondary party. Who? I'm not at liberty to disclose that until the window closes. Caleb stood. Ranger stood with him, clearing the doorway in one motion, falling into heel position without a command. Lyle watched them leave. He did not offer his hand again. Outside, the afternoon heat had thickened. May in the Tennessee Valley. Humidity settling into the limestone buildings and the cracked asphalt like something that intended to stay. Caleb opened the truck door. Ranger jumped in. He did not start the engine immediately. He sat with his hands on the wheel and looked at the street. Corbin Bend was not a town that moved fast. 12,000 people, a river, a dead railroad, and a bridge that a dead colonel had bought, for reasons no one questioned, because the dead colonel had also funded the park, the scholarship, and the new wing of the library. He started the truck. Chapel Bridge stood a mile and a half south of town, where the county road turned to gravel and the river narrowed between limestone bluffs. The bridge had not carried a train in 23 years. Its iron lattice rose in a pointed arch that, from the east bank, gave it the silhouette of a Gothic chapel window. Locals had called it that for decades before Pace bought it. The name was on the county maps. It was on the signs. It was one of those facts that had outlived its origin story and become simply true. Caleb parked on the gravel apron and stepped out. The river was high for May. Brown water moving at a steady clip, carrying branches and foam from the storms 2 days earlier. The bridge sat 60 feet above the waterline, 400 feet across. Iron trusses bolted and riveted in a pattern that repeated every 32 feet. Rust had claimed the surface, but not the structure. Someone had been maintaining it. The bolts were oiled. The decking, though aged, showed patches where boards had been replaced within the last 5 years. Caleb stood at the east end and assessed. This was habit. Before you boarded any vessel, before you walked any structure over water, you read it. You looked for sag, for lateral shift, for any indication that the thing between you and the river had an opinion about whether you should be there. The bridge looked sound. The bridge looked maintained. The bridge looked like exactly what Garrett Lyles said it was, an eccentric old officer's pet project. He walked to the east end of the bridge. Ranger followed. At the first truss, Caleb stepped onto the decking, wood solid under his boots. He moved forward, 20 feet, 40. Ranger did not follow. Caleb turned. The dog stood at the edge of the bridge deck, all 4 feet planted, ears flat, then forward, then flat again. His body dropped 2 inches at the shoulder, the stance of an animal preparing to resist force. Ranger, here! The dog did not move. Ranger, heel! Nothing. Ranger looked at the bridge, then at Caleb, then back at the bridge. Bleib. The German command Mac had taught him. Stay. Ranger sat, but he did not advance a single inch onto the deck. Caleb had owned this dog for 4 years. Ranger had followed him into flooded basements, into thunderstorms, through 4th of July fireworks without flinching. The dog did not refuse. That was not something he did. Until now. Caleb turned back to the bridge, alone. He walked the full span, 400 feet of iron and wood over moving water. His boots tested each section. Solid. Maintained. Whoever Pace had hired to keep this bridge had done professional work. Halfway across, he stopped. 22 years on special warfare combatant craft. He had inspected hulls in the dark by touch. He had read the underside of a SOCR boat by running his hand along the keel line, feeling for stress fractures, impact deformation, anything that didn't belong. You learned the difference between factory and field repair, the way a surgeon learned the difference between scar tissue and healthy flesh. By feel. The truss on the west pier was different. Not damaged, not deteriorated. Different. A section of iron plate at the base of the pier, roughly 4 feet by 3 feet, had been cut and re-welded. The weld bead was clean, professional, MIG, not stick. And it was newer than anything else on the bridge by at least 15 years. Caleb crouched. He ran his fingers along the seam. The plate was flush with the surrounding iron, but the grain was wrong. The original trusses had been hot riveted. This plate had been welded in place with modern technique. Someone had opened this section and sealed it again. He stood, looked back at the east end. Ranger was still sitting, motionless, watching him from 400 feet away with the patience of an animal that had already made its decision. Yeah, I see it too. The Corbin Bend County Archives occupied the basement of the old municipal building on 2nd Street. The stairs were narrow, the ceiling low, the air conditioned to a temperature that preserved paper but discouraged visitors. Fluorescent lights hummed in 2-second cycles. June Harwell stood behind a counter stacked with acid-free boxes, sorting deed transfers from 1987. She looked up when Caleb came down the stairs. Ranger's nails clicked on the linoleum behind him. She was 41. Brown hair cut at the jaw, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She wore a gray cardigan over a white blouse and held a pencil the way some people held cigarettes, between the 2nd and 3rd finger, always ready. "Can I help you?" "I need property records for the Chapel Bridge, transfer history, permits, any county filings." "You're Caleb Dunn." "That's right." "I heard about the inheritance." "Small town." She set the pencil down. Ranger walked past Caleb, past the counter, and stopped beside June. Not in front of her, beside her. He sat and looked up. June looked down at the dog, then at Caleb. "Does he do that?" "No, he doesn't." June held Caleb's gaze for a moment, then reached down and touched the top of Ranger's head once, brief, acknowledging. "The bridge records are in the property section. Transfer was recorded in 2009. Pace bought it from the county for $1. $1. It was a liability. No one wanted a decommissioned railroad bridge. The county was going to demolish it. Pace offered to take ownership and maintain it. They were happy to let it go. And he sealed part of the structure. June's expression shifted. Not surprise, something closer to defensiveness. "I inspected the bridge this morning. There's a section on the west pier that's been cut and re-welded. Modern technique on a bridge built in 1903. Colonel Pace restored the bridge. He invested considerable personal funds. If he reinforced a section, he didn't reinforce it. He sealed it. There's a difference." June took her glasses off her forehead and set them on the counter. "Mr. Dunn, Colonel Pace funded the Corbin Bend Community Scholarship. He donated the land for Riverside Park. He paid for the new wing at the library. I wrote a chapter about him in the county history volume, The Benefactor of Corbin Bend. I'm not asking about his donations. I'm asking about a weld seam that doesn't belong on a 100-year-old bridge. If the records don't support whatever theory you're building, you leave." "Fair. And you keep that dog out of the rare documents room. He'll stay with me. June held his gaze for one more second. Then she turned and walked toward the archive stacks. Her shoes made no sound on the linoleum. She moved through the shelves with the efficiency of someone who had organized and reorganized this space until it matched the architecture of her own thinking. No hesitation, no searching. She pulled a box from the third row, second shelf, and carried it back to the reading table. Ranger watched her go, then looked at Caleb. His tail moved once. Not a wag, a decision. "Yeah," Caleb said. "I noticed." The property transfer file for Chapel Bridge was 14 pages. Caleb read it at a wooden table in the archive basement, while June pulled related records from adjacent sections. Ranger lay under the table, chin on Caleb's boot, breathing in the slow rhythm of a dog who had decided the current situation required patience rather than action. The transfer was clean. Pace had purchased the bridge and the surrounding 50-foot easement for $1 in March 2009. The county commission minutes showed the vote was unanimous. No objections, no public comment period. One council member noted for the record that Colonel Pace's generosity to this community is well established, and the bridge could not be in better hands. The maintenance records were sparse. Pace had filed annual certifications with the county, stating the bridge was structurally sound. The certifications were signed by Pace himself. No independent engineer, no third-party inspection. For 15 years, the only person who had assessed the condition of that bridge was the man who owned it. Caleb counted the filings. 15 annual certifications, each one identical in language, each one signed with the same black ink, the same rigid signature that Caleb remembered from operational orders and leave authorizations, and, once, a condolence letter. Caleb set the file aside. "What do you have on the easement survey?" June brought a rolled map. 1903 Railroad Survey, updated in 2009 at the time of transfer. The update was minimal. Property lines, access points, setback from the river. Nothing unusual. Then, Caleb unrolled the 1903 original beside it. He had spent 2 decades reading charts, river charts, coastal charts, topographic overlays printed on waterproof paper and taped to the dash of a sock boat at 40 knots. Contour lines were a language. You read them not word by word, but in patterns. The West Pier Foundation on the 1903 survey showed a solid iron base. Standard construction. The 2009 update showed the same dimensions, same footprint. But the contour lines were different. In the original, the West Pier sat on bedrock that sloped gently toward the river. In the 2009 survey, that slope was flattened, graded. Someone had modified the ground around the base of the West Pier. The survey recorded the change without commenting on it. "This grading," Caleb pointed, "that's not natural erosion. Someone brought in fill, leveled the base." June leaned in, looked. Her pencil tapped the contour lines. That could be part of the restoration. Restoration doesn't change the grade around a pier foundation. That's structural modification. And it wasn't permitted. There's no county filing for earthwork. June straightened. Her face had changed. Not convinced. Not dismissive either. Something between. "What exactly do you think is in that bridge?" "I don't think anything yet. But your records show 15 years of self-certified inspections by the owner, unpermitted earthwork at the foundation, and a sealed compartment that wasn't part of the original construction. I'm going to open it. You can't just cut open a bridge. I'm a welder. I own the bridge. And the Dichuk says no third-party inspections. It doesn't say the beneficiary can't look. June studied him, then the map, then the dog under the table, who had lifted his head and was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. That man funded every scholarship in this county. You'd better be sure before you make him a villain. He went back to the bridge at 6:15 the next morning. The cutting torch was in the truck bed, along with 2 flashlights, a pry bar, and a canvas tarp. Ranger rode in the passenger seat, steady, watching the road. The river was quieter than the day before. The water had dropped 4 inches overnight. Morning light came in low from the east, catching the iron lattice and throwing long shadows across the deck. Caleb parked at the same gravel apron, unloaded. Ranger jumped down and walked to the east end of the bridge, stopped, sat. Same position as yesterday. He would not go further. But this time, he did something different. He turned his head toward the west pier, lifted his nose, and froze. One front paw raised slightly off the ground, his tail straightened behind him. Point. Caleb had seen the stance 100 times in working dogs. Ranger was indicating a direction, not generally, specifically. The West Pier. I know, buddy. He carried the torch onto the bridge. The walk felt longer alone. The iron creaked in the morning heat, expanding in slow pops that echoed off the water below. At the West Pier, he set down his gear and crouched beside the welded panel. He lit the torch. The flame cut blue-white in the dim space beneath the truss. He worked the seam slowly. 22 years of cutting metal. He knew what clean separation felt like, and what forced separation felt like. This panel had been designed to be opened. The weld was strong, but not structural. It was a seal, not a bond. The plate came free in 11 minutes. He set it aside on the decking, killed the torch, and pointed a flashlight into the opening. The compartment was roughly 5 feet deep, 4 feet wide, 3 feet tall. Dry, insulated from the exterior by the bridge's iron mass. The air inside was stale, but not damp. Someone had waterproofed the interior with marine sealant. The work was precise. 2 wooden crates sat inside, side by side. Caleb pulled the first one out. Pine, stained dark. No markings on the exterior. The lid was nailed shut, but the nails had been pulled and reset at least once. He pried it open with the bar. Inside, wrapped in acid-free tissue, 3 Mesopotamian cylinder seals, each roughly the size of a shotgun shell, carved with figures and cuneiform text. 2 pottery fragments with inscription, a small stone figure roughly 6 inches tall, missing 1 arm. And beneath them, a leather folio containing a handwritten manifest. The tissue wrapping was precise, museum grade. Whoever packed these crates had handled antiquities before. The cylinder seals were nested in individual foam cutouts, custom fitted, the kind of care that indicated value, not sentiment. Caleb had seen objects like these before. Basra, 2007. His crew had been tasked with interdicting a river barge suspected of carrying weapons on the Shat al-Arab. The barge carried weapons. It also carried a crate of antiquities looted from the Iraq National Museum's unprotected storage facility in the chaos of the previous year. The Navy had seized the crate. Caleb had watched a cultural affairs officer catalog the contents with gloved hands and a digital camera, while his boat crew stood perimeter in 112-degree heat. The officer had explained, to no one in particular, that a single cylinder seal in good condition could bring $40,000 on the international market. A complete one, with provenance documentation, could bring 10 times that. He recognized the cylinder seals. He recognized the wrapping method. He recognized the manifest format. Handwritten. Dated. Locations coded in a system that used Iraqi province abbreviations, followed by a numeric grid. The same system the Navy used for operational reporting in the region. He opened the folio. The manifest listed 17 items across 6 shipment dates. Each date included an origin point, a transit route, and a destination. The origin points were all in Iraq. The transit routes passed through Kuwait, then stateside through a Gulf Coast port. The destination, every time, was the same. A river barge landing 3 miles south of Corbin Bend. The dates spanned from 2006 to 2013. Caleb turned to the last page. The final entry was dated September 14th, 2013. Origin, Basra Province. Route, Standard. Status, Delivered. And below it, in different ink, written harder, the pen pressed deep enough to score the paper beneath. Rourke flagged. Handle. Rourke. Petty Officer First Class Mackenzie Rourke. Mac. Caleb's hand did not move from the page. His breathing changed. Ranger, 400 feet away at the east end of the bridge, stood up. The dog could not have seen the page, could not have read the name, but he stood, and he did not sit back down. Mac. The name left his mouth before he decided to say it. 11 years since Mac had died. 11 years since the official report had said hostile fire during extraction on the Shat al-Arab. 11 years since Commander Wesley Pace had signed the condolence letter and shaken Caleb's hand at the memorial and said, "He was one of the best." Caleb closed the folio, placed it back in the crate, placed the crate back in the compartment, did not touch the second crate. He stood. His knees protested. His back protested louder. He walked 400 feet back to the east end where Ranger was standing, rigid, waiting. Caleb crouched in front of the dog. Ranger's eyes were locked on his. Brown, steady, unblinking. "We're not done here." Ranger's tail did not move. His ears stayed forward. But he leaned forward, just slightly, and pressed his nose against Caleb's wrist. Once. Then he pulled back and sat. The second crate was still in the compartment. Caleb had not opened it. The manifest said, "Handle." The date was 3 weeks before Mac died. He needed to know what was in that second crate. But not today. Today, he needed to sit with the fact that the man who had commanded his crew who had sent them downriver into hostile territory, who had written Mac's family a letter praising his sacrifice, had written the word handle next to Mac's name in a smuggler's ledger. Caleb drove back to the shop. He did not turn on the radio. Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat and watched the road. Neither of them had anything to say about it. The shop was dark by the time he got back. He had not turned on the overhead lights when he left that morning, and he did not turn them on now. He sat in the truck with the engine off and the windows down, and the manifest's last page repeating in his head like a frequency he could not tune out. Rourke flagged. Handle, September 14th, 2013. Mac died October 3rd, 2013. 19 days. Caleb opened the truck door. Ranger jumped down. The dog circled the yard once, checking the perimeter out of habit, then came back and sat at the shop entrance, waiting. Caleb walked past him, through the shop to the small living quarters in the back. Kitchen table, 2 chairs, a sink, a window that faced the river. He sat. He did not eat. He did not make coffee. He listened. The river was audible from here at night, a low, steady sound that changed pitch with the current. In the dark, if he closed his eyes, it sounded like engine wash, like the turbines on a SOCR boat idling at the insertion point, waiting for the go signal. The crew locked in, and the night thick with humidity and the smell of diesel and river mud. It came back the way it always did, not as a decision, as a sound. The twin diesels at 3/4 throttle, the hull slapping the surface in a rhythm that meant speed, not comfort. Radio chatter compressed into bursts. Mac's voice from the forward gun mount, calling out distance markers to the extraction point. 800 meters, Senior Chief. 750. 700. The night was October 2nd, 2013. 2 boats. Caleb's crew on the lead SOC-R, Mac's crew on the follow. They had run this route 4 times that month. The Shat al-Arab, south of Basra, narrow enough in places that the banks felt like walls. The mission was extraction. 3 intelligence assets waiting at a predetermined point on the eastern shore. Mac had come to Caleb 2 days earlier, in the equipment bay, midnight. No one else around. Something's off with the cargo runs, Senior Chief. Caleb had been cleaning a weapon. He remembered that specifically because he had not stopped cleaning it when Mac spoke. He had kept his hands moving, a habit from 20 years of conversations that happened while your hands did something else. What kind of off? Manifests don't match. There's cargo moving through the transit point that isn't on the official logs. Small crates, different routing, and the commander signs off on them personally, not through the logistics officer. You're talking about the CO. I know who I'm talking about. Bring it up the chain. Document what you have. Take it to the commander directly. Mac had looked at him. 26 years old, PO1, 3 tours, steady hands, and a dog he'd raised from a puppy. A dog named Ranger, who now slept at Caleb's feet. I did, Senior Chief. I brought it to Commander Pace last week. He told me the cargo was classified, and to drop it. Caleb had not stopped cleaning the weapon. He should have. He should have put the weapon down and looked Mac in the eye and said, Then we go outside the chain. We call NCIS. We go to the JAG. We go around him. That was what he should have said. What he said was, if the CO says it's classified, it might be classified. Give it a week. If it still doesn't sit right, we'll figure it out together. Mac nodded. He did not argue. He trusted Caleb the way junior sailors trusted senior chiefs, which was to say, completely, structurally, in a manner that did not leave room for the possibility that the senior chief might be wrong. 3 days later, Mac's boat took fire during the extraction run. The Follow SOC-R, Mac's boat, was hit at the stern. One round through the engine housing, one through the hull below the waterline. The boat lost propulsion in the channel. Mac was on the forward mount. Caleb's boat was 400 meters ahead, the darkness between them thick with engine noise and river spray. He ordered his coxswain to come about. By the time they reached the follow boat, Mac was in the water. The life jacket had not deployed. The current in the Shat al-Arab runs at 4 knots in October. They found the boat drifting against the eastern bank, listing hard to starboard, the crew pulling themselves onto the mud. Mac was not with them. His coxswain said he had gone over the port side when the second round hit. No one saw him surface. They recovered his body 6 hours later, 2 miles downstream. Caleb was the one who pulled him from the shallows. He remembered the weight, not the physical weight, the other weight, the one that settled into your arms and did not leave when you let go. The official report listed the cause as hostile fire from the eastern bank, small arms, unknown origin. No enemy combatants were recovered. No shell casings were found at the suspected firing position. Caleb had read the report 11 times. He had never believed it. But he had never had a reason, just a feeling. The feeling that an extraction route they had run 4 times without incident had been compromised on the one night that Mac's boat was in the follow position. Now he had a reason. A page in a leather folio, written in the handwriting of his commanding officer. Rourke flagged. Handle. The kitchen was dark. The river moved outside the window. Ranger came in from the shop, his nails ticking on the floor. He did not go to his bed. He went into the back of the shop and came back carrying something in his mouth. A wrench. Not a wrench from the shop. A wrench that Caleb kept in a drawer under the workbench, wrapped in a cloth. Mac's wrench. A 6-inch adjustable that Mac had carried in his vest pocket on every mission because, he said, if the boat breaks down, I'm not waiting for the mechanic. Ranger set it on the floor at Caleb's feet, placed it carefully, then sat back and looked up. Where did you find that? The dog did not answer. The dog did not need to. Caleb reached down and picked up the wrench. The handle was worn smooth. Mac's grip pattern still visible in the chrome. He held it for a long time. He had told Mac to report it. Mac had reported it. And the man Mac reported it to had written handle next to his name. Caleb set the wrench on the table. He did not wrap it. He did not put it back in the drawer. I hear you. He said it to Mac. He said it to the wrench. He said it to the dog, who had carried a dead man's tool across a dark shop floor to the one person who would understand what it meant. Ranger placed one paw on Caleb's knee, held it there, then removed it and lay down beside the chair, head facing the door. The second crate was still in the bridge, the flash drive that Mac had recorded, the evidence that Pace had arranged a sailor's death to protect a smuggling operation. all of it still locked inside an iron arch over a river in Alabama. Tomorrow. He sat in the dark kitchen until the river sound stopped sounding like engines. Then he went to bed. Ranger followed. Neither of them slept much. The second crate waited. The bridge waited. And somewhere in the 11 years between a dead sailor and a dead colonel, the truth had been sealed inside an iron arch, patient as rust, waiting for someone to cut it open. He brought the manifest to June the next morning, 8:14 a.m. The archive was empty except for the fluorescent hum and the smell of old paper and climate control. Caleb had not slept well. The kitchen table still held Mac's wrench and the weight of a decision he had not yet made but could feel forming. The way weather forms on a river before you see the clouds. June was already at her desk, coffee in a ceramic mug, steam still rising. A stack of deed transfers from 1987 sat untouched beside her keyboard. She had been waiting for him. Caleb could tell because the coffee was fresh and the work was not started. And June Harwell did not sit idle at her desk unless she was waiting for something specific. She looked up when Caleb came down the stairs. Ranger's nails on the linoleum announced them 3 seconds before they appeared. "I need you to look at something." He set the leather folio on her desk, did not open it. Let her decide. June studied the exterior. Leather, stained, aged. She put on cotton gloves without being asked, a reflex that told Caleb more about her than any conversation had. She opened the folio. She read. Caleb watched her read. Her expression moved through stages he could track. Professional curiosity, then confusion, then a slow tightening around the jaw that meant she was cross-referencing what she saw against what she knew. "Where did you get this?" "The bridge, West Pier compartment." "These dates." She pointed to the manifest's third column. 2006 through 2013. These are shipping dates? "Transit dates. Origin, Iraq. Destination, Corbin Bend. River barge landing 3 miles south of here." June turned pages. Her gloved fingers moved carefully, lifting each sheet by the corner, the habit of someone who had handled 10,000 fragile documents and intended to handle 10,000 more. She stopped at a line in the middle of the 4th page. This coding system, province abbreviations, and grid numbers. Standard Navy operational reporting format for the region. I used the same system for 8 years. June set the folio down, removed her gloves, folded them once, and placed them beside the document, with the precision of someone putting distance between herself and what she had just read. Colonel Pace used military logistics to move stolen antiquities from Iraq to Alabama. That's what the manifest says. The manifest says what someone wrote in it. That's not proof. It's a claim. Check it against your records. You have county shipping logs. Barge traffic on this river is permitted through the county clerk's office. If these transit dates match documented barge arrivals, that's corroboration. June looked at him, then at Ranger, who had settled under the reading table and was watching her with his chin on his paws. The dog's eyes moved between June and the folio on the desk, back and forth, as if tracking a conversation he could follow but not join. "You realize what you're asking me to do?" I'm asking you to look at records you already have. You're asking me to build a case against a man who built half this town. I'm asking you to check dates. She stood, walked to the archive stacks, pulled 3 boxes from a section Caleb had not seen her access before. County clerk records, shipping permits, barge traffic logs for the river corridor. She carried them to the table and opened the first box without ceremony. They worked for 4 hours. June pulled permits. Caleb matched dates. The method was simple. The manifest listed 17 shipment entries with transit dates. The county clerk's office logged every barge that passed through the Corbin Bend River corridor because barge traffic required a county waterway permit renewed annually. If the manifest dates matched barge arrivals, the smuggling operation was not theoretical. It was documented. The pattern emerged by 11:30 a.m. 6 of the 17 manifest entries matched permitted barge arrivals within a 48-hour window. 6 shipments from Iraq that coincided with barge traffic documented by the county clerk's office. The barges were registered to a commercial freight company based in Mobile called Southern Corridor Logistics. The company's authorized signatory, listed on every permit, was a name Caleb did not recognize: David Strother, operations manager. But the company's registered agent, filed with the Alabama Secretary of State, was Garrett Lyle. He's the registered agent for half the businesses in the county. That's what attorneys do in small towns. He's also the executor of Pace's estate and the man who told me the colonel was eccentric about that bridge. June did not respond to that. She pulled another box. Older records, property transfers. The work had shifted from skepticism to methodology. She was no longer deciding whether to look. She was deciding how deep. The property records told the rest of the story. Not quickly, not obviously, but the numbers did not lie. And June knew how to read numbers in context because she had spent 9 years organizing the paper trail of an entire county's transactions. By 1:15 p.m., they had established a second pattern. Every property Pace had purchased along the river corridor, 3 in total, had been acquired within 6 months of a manifest shipment date. Each property included river access. Each had a structure on it, a barn, a warehouse, a storage building that could receive cargo from the water without being visible from the road. The prices Pace paid were above market value, not extravagantly, 10 to 15%, enough to ensure the sellers did not negotiate, did not ask questions, and closed fast. This is a supply chain. It's a logistics corridor. Entry point at the Gulf Coast port, river transit to Corbin Bend, distribution through properties with river access, final storage in the bridge. He ran it like an operation, because that's what it was. June sat back. Her hands were flat on the table. The pencil she always carried was on the floor. She had dropped it sometime in the last hour and not picked it up. Caleb noticed it there, between the table leg and the baseboard, resting where it had fallen. Some things needed to stay where they fell, until the person who dropped them was ready to reach for them again. The chapter I wrote about him. The benefactor of Corbin Bend. I presented it at the County Historical Society meeting. 60 people. Standing room. They applauded. Caleb did not comment on that. What he said was, "Turn to the last page of the manifest." June turned to it, read the final entry. September 14th, 2013. Origin, Basra Province. Route, Standard. Status, Delivered. Then the note beneath, different ink. pressed hard into the paper, the pen scoring the sheet beneath. Rourke flagged. Handle. Rourke? Petty Officer First Class Mackenzie Rourke. My crew, my boat. He died October 3rd, 2013, 19 days after that entry. June's phone rang. The sound was sharp in the quiet basement. She let it ring 4 times before picking it up. The conversation was brief. Caleb heard only her side. Yes. No, I'm in the archive. No, standard research. I understand. She hung up. Her face had changed. Not fear, something colder. Recognition. That was my supervisor, Margaret Holm, county administrator. And she asked what I was researching, specifically what records I had accessed this morning. She's never done that before, not once in 9 years. Someone told her to ask. Caleb looked at the boxes spread across the table. 3 hours of records, documented pattern, a dead man's logistics network laid out in county ink. Can you copy what we have? I can photograph the key documents. The originals stay here. But Caleb, if Margaret reports what I'm accessing, those files could be reclassified by tomorrow, moved to restricted. County administrator has that authority under the Records Management Ordinance. Then photograph them now. June reached for her phone. Her hands were steady. Not calm, steady. There was a difference. Calm meant you felt safe. Steady meant you had decided to act regardless of how you felt. She photographed 41 pages in 14 minutes. Manifest cross-references, barge permits, property transfers, company filings. Each image taken square, centered, readable. She worked without speaking, holding each page flat with one hand while she photographed with the other. The method of someone who had digitized thousands of documents and understood that a crooked image was an unusable image. Caleb watched her. He had seen the same focus in boat crews under fire. The hands do the job. The fear waits its turn. When she finished, she placed the records back in their boxes, returned the boxes to the shelves. The archive looked exactly as it had that morning. No indication that anything had changed. The fluorescent lights hummed. The climate control cycled. The boxes sat on their shelves in their acid-free containers, holding the paper history of a county that was about to learn its most celebrated citizen had been a criminal. But everything had. Caleb drove to the bridge at 4 p.m. The afternoon heat had built a haze over the river, blurring the far bank into soft shapes that looked temporary. The second crate was still in the compartment. He had left it untouched the day before because one revelation at a time was all his body could process. Now he needed what was inside. Ranger rode in the passenger seat, head up, watching the road with the focused attention of a dog who understood that the truck going to the bridge meant something was about to happen. At the gravel apron, the dog jumped down and walked to the east end of the bridge. Same position, same refusal. But this time, when Caleb walked the 400 feet to the west pier and crouched at the open compartment, Ranger did something new. He stood, walked 10 feet onto the bridge deck, stopped, sat. 10 feet. Not the full span, not even close, but 10 feet more than yesterday. 10 feet closer to whatever it was that had kept him at the edge. Caleb watched the dog settle his weight, deliberate, chosen, as if each foot of deck was a negotiation between instinct and something deeper. "That's enough, buddy. Stay there." Caleb pulled the second crate from the compartment, heavier than the first, different construction, metal-reinforced corners. A padlock, combination type, rusted but functional. He tried 3 combinations: standard dates, Pace's service number, the bridge purchase year, Mac's birth date. None worked. The 4th attempt was 1003, October 3rd. The date Mac died. The lock opened. Inside, a canvas bag sealed with a zip tie. Caleb cut it open with his folding knife. Mac's dog tags. The chain still crusted with river silt that had dried and hardened over 11 years. A personal journal, waterproof cover, the kind they sold at the PX for $3. A folding knife with Mac's initials scratched into the handle, and a USB flash drive in a waterproof case. Caleb held the dog tags. The metal was cold despite the May heat. He turned them in his hand. Rourke, Mackenzie J. Blood type, social. Religious preference, none specified. The stamping was standard military issue. The chain was not. Mac had replaced the standard ball chain with a braided paracord loop he'd made himself on a Sunday afternoon at the base, sitting cross-legged on the dock beside the boat while Ranger chewed a tennis ball beside him. Said it was quieter on the boat. Said the ball chain clinked against the engine housing during night ops and the sound carried across water. Caleb remembered the conversation. He remembered where they were standing when Mac said it. He remembered the light. He remembered thinking it was the kind of unnecessary modification that only someone who planned on staying alive for a long time would bother making. Mac had planned on staying alive for a long time. He had planned on a lot of things. 20 years in the Navy, chief by 35, a piece of land somewhere with water access, Ranger growing old on a porch. None of that had happened. What had happened was a night on a river and a round through a hull and a current that moved faster than anyone could swim. Mac's effects had been returned to his family. Caleb had attended the memorial at Naval Station Norfolk, had watched the flag get folded, had listened to the volleys. The official inventory listed personal items, flag, letter of condolence, medals. Standard procedure. Every item accounted for. These items had not been on that inventory. Pace had kept them, separated them from the official return, held them in a locked crate inside a sealed bridge for 11 years. Caleb understood why. Insurance. If the smuggling operation was ever discovered, Mac's effects inside the compartment would suggest Mac was involved, a participant, a co-conspirator who had hidden his share of the evidence alongside the cargo, the dog tags, the journal, the knife. All of it placed beside the stolen antiquities to create the appearance of complicity. Pace had not just killed Mac. He had built a frame that would survive them both. A dead man's reputation, engineered to absorb the blame if the truth ever surfaced. The calculation was precise, military precise. The kind of planning that came from a mind trained to anticipate contingencies and neutralize threats before they materialized. Pace had been good at his job. That was the worst part. He had been a competent officer and a competent criminal, and the skills that made him effective at one had made him lethal at the other. Caleb set the dog tags on top of the crate. He would not leave them here. They were coming with him. Whatever else happened with the bridge and the evidence and the investigation that was forming in his mind, Mac's tags were not staying sealed inside a dead man's insurance policy. Caleb opened the journal. Mac's handwriting. Small, precise, tilted slightly right. The entries were routine through June and July 2013. Observations, weather, mission notes in abbreviation that Caleb could still decode without effort. 0430 insert, 6 packs, Eastern Bank, no contact. Personal thoughts in sentences that never ran longer than 10 words. Called Mom. She sounded tired. Ranger ate my boot again. The handwriting was so familiar, it felt physical. Caleb had seen it on equipment logs, on after-action reports, on the sticky notes Mac left on the boat dash. Oil pressure running 2 pounds per square inch high, port engine. Mentioned to SWO. No response. Always documenting, always noting. Mac had treated the world as a system that could be understood if you recorded enough data points. Until September. September's entries were different, longer, more detailed. The handwriting tightened, the letters smaller, as if the act of writing had become urgent rather than habitual. Cargo discrepancies documented with dates and quantities. Conversations noted with participants identified by initials. WP appeared 14 times in the final 20 pages. WP. Wesley Pace. September 12th. WP signed off on shipment 14. No logistics officer involved. Handled personally. 3rd time this quarter. Cargo weight doesn't match manifest. Short by 40 kilograms. Where is the difference going? September 18th. Spoke to WP directly. He told me to stand down. Exact words? It's classified material, Rourke. Not your concern. But classified material goes through the S2 shop. This didn't. September 25th. Made copies of manifests 12 to 17. Discrepancies documented. Photographed loading at Pier 4, 0200. 2 crates not on any manifest. Small. Heavy for their size. WP present. Supervised personally. The last entry was dated September 30th, 2013, 3 days before Mac died. Reported to WP again. Same answer. Classified. But I copied the manifests. If something happens, the copies are insurance. Told Senior Chief something was wrong. He said, go through the chain. I did. The chain is the problem. Insurance. Mac had known. And the last line hit Caleb harder than anything in the manifest had. He said, go through the chain. I did. The chain is the problem. Caleb had given Mac that advice. Go through the chain of command. Trust the system. And the system had killed him for trusting it. Caleb closed the journal, placed it back in the crate, picked up the flash drive, turned it over in his hand. A piece of plastic smaller than his thumb, containing whatever Mac had thought was worth dying for. He looked at Ranger, sitting 10 feet onto the bridge, watching him. The dog had not moved, had not come closer, had not retreated. Holding his position with the discipline of an animal who understood that some ground, once taken, was not given back. "We need a computer." Ranger's tail moved once, a single sweep across the bridge deck. Then he stood, turned, and walked back to the east end. Caleb watched him go. The dog moved with certainty now, not reluctance, not avoidance. He had come 10 feet onto the bridge, and he was leaving on his own terms. That meant something. Caleb was not sure what yet, but it meant something. He did not own a computer. The welding shop did not require one. Invoices were handwritten on carbon copy pads. Payments were cash or check. The only screen in Caleb's daily life was his phone, and a phone was not the place for whatever Mac had saved on that drive. June had a computer. June had an office with a door and a lock, and a woman behind the desk who had spent the last 24 hours watching her professional certainties dissolve. He drove to the archive. It was 5:40 p.m. June was locking the front door. She saw the truck and stopped, keys in hand, halfway through the turn. Caleb got out, carrying the crate. Ranger jumped down and stood beside him. June looked at the crate, at Caleb's face, at whatever she saw there. "I need your computer." "The archive closes at 5. "This can't wait until morning." She studied him for 2 seconds. Then she unlocked the door and held it open. They went inside. June locked the door behind them. The archive was different after hours. The fluorescent lights hummed louder without the competing sounds of the building above. The boxes on the shelves seemed to press closer, as if they had opinions about being read after dark. June cleared her desk. Caleb opened the crate and handed her the flash drive. She inserted it into the laptop. The drive mounted. 4 folders. The first held photographs. 47 images. Mac had used a phone camera, low resolution, taken in low light. The timestamps ran from August to September 2013. Crates being loaded onto a river barge at a port facility. The facility was not identified in the images, but the equipment visible in the background, the crane markings, the bollard style, the safety signage in English and Arabic, all pointed to Gulf Coast commercial infrastructure. 2 images showed manifests, handwritten, matching the format in the leather folio from the bridge. 3 images showed a figure standing at the edge of the frame, partially obscured, supervising the loading. The figure wore a Navy working uniform. The rank insignia, visible in one frame through digital zoom, showed a commander's oak leaf. June clicked through the photographs slowly. Caleb did not need to see them slowly. He had been in that port. He had stood on that pier. He recognized the angle of the light, the color of the water, the particular shade of green that the Navy painted everything in that part of the world. The second folder held scanned documents, shipping receipts, transit permits, routing orders with military logistics codes that Caleb recognized from his years running resupply coordination for Special Boat Team 20. The codes were authentic. The routing was not. Someone had used legitimate military logistics infrastructure to move unauthorized cargo alongside regular supply shipments. The technique was called piggybacking, and it required command-level access to the logistics chain. You could not piggyback a shipment as a junior officer or enlisted sailor. You needed to be the person who signed the routing orders. You needed to be the C.O. The third folder held a single audio file, 3 megabytes, 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Caleb pressed play. 2 voices. The recording quality was poor, compressed, likely captured by a phone microphone through fabric. Background noise suggested a confined space with metal walls, possibly a shipping container or the cab of a military vehicle. One voice Caleb recognized immediately. Wesley Pace, commander's voice. The cadence, the authority, the habit of speaking in declarative sentences that did not invite response. Caleb had heard that voice issue orders at 0300 in zero visibility conditions on the Tigris. Had heard it deliver mission briefs. Had heard it once at Mac's memorial service. Read a passage from a book about courage that the man reading it had clearly never understood. The second voice was unfamiliar. Male, older, civilian cadence, unhurried, comfortable with the transaction being discussed. The conversation lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Pace discussed a shipment, dates, routing, quantities, clinical, efficient. The civilian asked about the container from the Basra lot. Pace confirmed it was in transit. Standard routing. Expected arrival within the week. The civilian mentioned a buyer in New York. Pace said the price was acceptable and that the cylinder seals in this lot were higher grade than previous shipments. Then the civilian said something that made June stop breathing beside Caleb. And the senior chief's boy? The one asking questions? Pace's voice did not change, did not hesitate, did not lower. Handled. Handled how? Handled. Don't ask again. The recording ended. The fourth folder on the flash drive was empty. Mac had created it and named it evidence_backup. He had made the folder, but never filled it. He ran out of time. The archive basement was silent, except for the hum of the climate control system and the sound of June breathing beside him, which had gone shallow and fast. Her hands were on the desk, palms down, the position of someone bracing against a surface that might shift beneath them. That's him. That's Pace. And the senior chief's boy. Mac. He's talking about Mac. Mac was 26. He wasn't anyone's boy. He was a petty officer first class with 3 combat deployments and a security clearance and a dog he'd raised from 8 weeks old. Handled. He said it like a task on a checklist. Past tense. Done. Move on. Caleb did not respond immediately. He was listening to the recording again in his head, matching the cadence, the word choice, the flat efficiency of a man describing the disposal of a subordinate who had threatened his operation. A man who had written a condolence letter to Mac's mother and shaken Caleb's hand at the memorial and said he was one of the best. A man who had stood at the podium in his dress whites and read scripture he did not believe to an audience that did, because he knew that was what the ceremony required, and Wesley Pace had always understood ceremonies. June turned to face him. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. The combination made her look older and younger at the same time. This isn't corruption, Caleb. This is murder. Yes. What are you going to do? I'm going to finish what Mac started. How? Mac tried the chain of command. The chain of command killed him. I'm not going through the chain. I'm going around it. NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. They handle crimes involving Navy personnel, active or retired. If a commander arranged the death of an enlisted sailor to protect a criminal operation, that's their jurisdiction. Not the county sheriff, not the state police. NCIS. You have contacts? I have a phone number. A man I served with. He'll know who to call. Ranger had been lying under the desk. He raised his head, looked at June, then crossed the space between them, slow and deliberate, and pressed his nose against her hand. Brief. Once. Then he sat beside her chair, facing the door, not guarding Caleb this time, guarding her. The choice was visible and considered. The dog had assessed the room and decided who needed him more in that moment. June looked down at the dog, then at Caleb. Her voice, when it came, was not the voice of an archivist or a skeptic, or a woman defending the chapter she had written about a dead man's generosity. It was the voice of someone who understood, fully and without qualification, that the foundation she had built her professional life on had been constructed from stolen artifacts and a murdered sailor's silence. He used all of us. The scholarships, the park, the library wing, 20 years of generosity, and every dollar of it was blood money. The generosity was real. The people who received it were real. The kids on those scholarships are real. That doesn't make it better. No, it makes it worse. June closed the laptop, sat for a moment with her hands flat on the lid. The room was very quiet. The climate control cycled off, and for a few seconds the only sound was Ranger's breathing and the faint ticking of the building settling into its nighttime dimensions above them. Then she opened the laptop again. I need to rewrite that chapter. But first, I need to burn the one he wrote. Garrett Lyle arrived at Dunn Metalworks at 7:45 on a Thursday morning. The temperature was already 79 degrees, humidity at 84%. The river fog had burned off by 7, but the air still carried moisture that settled on metal surfaces and made everything in the shop feel slick. Caleb was grinding a weld seam on a gatepost. Routine work, the kind that kept his hands busy while his mind ran contingencies. He had been running contingencies since the archive. Where to store the flash drive, who to call first, what to say, and what to withhold. The grinding noise covered all of it. Ranger was in the yard, circling the fence line, checking corners the way he did every morning after breakfast. The dog's morning circuit took exactly 4 minutes. Caleb had timed it. The route never varied. North fence, east gate, south tree line, west wall, back to the shop door. If it took longer than 4 minutes, something had interrupted the pattern. If it took less, the dog was anxious. The silver sedan pulled into the gravel lot at 7:45. Ranger was on minute 2 of his circuit. He stopped, turned toward the car. His ears went forward, and his body dropped 2 inches at the shoulder, but he did not bark. He watched. Lyle stepped out. Same suit, different tie. He carried nothing. No folder, no briefcase. His hands were visible and empty. Caleb registered that detail instantly, filed it alongside every other observation about people who arrived unannounced at his place of work. Mr. Dunn. Caleb killed the grinder. lifted his visor, let the silence settle for 2 seconds before responding. Garrett. May I come in? You're in. Lyle looked around the shop, at the welding equipment, the half-finished projects, the organized chaos of a working fabricator's space. His eyes moved with appraisal, cataloging, calculating. It was a professional habit Caleb recognized because he had the same habit with different objects. Lyle assessed rooms. Caleb assessed boats. The skill was identical. The targets were different. I'll get to the point. The estate paperwork is time-sensitive. The 30-day window I mentioned is not negotiable. If you accept the inheritance, the properties transfer to your name, including the bridge. If you don't, the secondary beneficiary takes possession. Ooh. A trust, managed by my office. Your trust, the Colonel's Trust, administered by my firm. Standard estate planning. Caleb set down the grinder, pulled off his gloves. The burn scar on his right forearm caught the light. 14 inches of shiny tissue from a boat engine fire in 2009. He did not cover it. He did not adjust his sleeves. The scar was a fact about his body, and he treated it as such. I've been to the bridge, Garrett. Lyle's expression held. I've been inside the bridge. The expression changed, not dramatically, a contraction around the eyes, a slight adjustment of weight from the left foot to the right, small movements, involuntary, the kind that cost millions in poker games and careers in courtrooms. Caleb had spent 22 years reading people who were trying not to be read. Lyle was better than most, but not good enough. The Colonel did a lot of good for this town, Mr. Dunn. A great deal of good. Scholarships, infrastructure, community investment. Some things are better left where they are. Like Mac? Lyle's jaw tightened. For the first time since Caleb had met him, the attorney's composure showed a fracture. Not large, a hairline crack in polished stone. His voice, when it came, was lower than before, more careful. I don't know what you think you found. I think you do. Ranger had stopped circling the fence. He stood between Caleb and Lyle, body sideways, head turned toward the attorney. Not growling, not tense. Positioned. A living barrier placed precisely where a barrier was needed. His body language was not aggressive. It was architectural. He was a wall, and he knew it. Lyle looked at the dog's posture, at the calculation behind the dog's stillness. I hope that dog of yours doesn't wander at night. Coyotes out here. He turned and walked back to the sedan. 3 steps. 4. He did not look back. The door closed. The engine started. The gravel popped under the tires as he pulled out, turned south onto the county road, and disappeared toward town, toward Main Street, toward the limestone building where a brass plate read Lyle and Associates. And the only associate that mattered was a dead colonel whose legacy was about to collapse. Caleb stood in the shop doorway. Ranger came back to him, sat at his left side. The dog's body was warm against his leg. The morning was bright and still, and smelled like iron and gravel and the faint sulfur of grinding dust. Yeah, I heard him too. The threat was not subtle. Garrett Lyle was not a man who made threats by accident. Everything Caleb had observed about the attorney told him that Lyle operated on information and leverage, not impulse. The comment about the dog was a message delivered with the same precision Lyle applied to estate documents and handshakes. The message was clear. I know where you live. I know what you care about. And I am willing to damage both. Caleb looked at Ranger. The dog looked back. Brown eyes, steady, unconcerned. The dog did not know he had been threatened. He only knew he was where he was supposed to be. That was enough. It had always been enough. Caleb went back to the grinder. The gatepost still needed finishing. The weld seam was not going to smooth itself. He put his visor down, pulled the trigger, and let the sparks fill the space where Garrett Lyle's threat was still hanging in the air. The metal screamed. Ranger lay down in the shade by the fence and closed his eyes. The morning continued. But it was not the same morning it had been before the silver sedan arrived. The break-in happened 2 nights later. Saturday, 2:17 a.m. Caleb knew the time because the motion light on the shop's south wall triggered, and he saw the timestamp on the security monitor beside his bed. The monitor was a repurposed boat camera, low resolution, waterproof housing, mounted high on the shop's exterior wall. He had installed it 3 years ago, after someone stole a set of welding leads. It was not a security system. It was a habit. On the boats, you always had eyes on the perimeter, even when you were sleeping. The screen showed 2 figures, dark clothing, no visible faces. They moved through the shop with purpose, not searching, but destroying. The cutting torch was knocked from its mount. The regulator valves snapped off at the stem. Tools swept from the bench in a single arm motion. The welding table overturned, the base bent where someone had put a bar under the legs and levered it over. One figure worked the main area while the other went to the workbench. The drawer under the bench, the one where Mac's wrench had been, was pulled out and emptied onto the floor. The drawer was empty. The wrench was on the kitchen table where Caleb had left it. The whole operation took less than 3 minutes. Efficient. Targeted. They knew the layout. This was not vandalism. This was a controlled action designed to achieve a specific effect. Disable the shop and send a message. Ranger was outside. Barking. Continuous, urgent, sustained. Not the sharp, alert bark he used for strangers at the gate. Not the low growl for uncertainty. This was the full-volume alarm that meant genuine threat. The sound Caleb had heard the dog make exactly twice before in 4 years. Both times at things that warranted it. The barking came from beyond the fence line. The yard gate was open. Someone had unlatched it before or during the break-in, separating the dog from the shop. A deliberate move. Tactical. You remove the alarm system before you enter the target area. Caleb was out the back door in 4 seconds. Boots, no shirt, the sidearm he kept in the nightstand. He cleared the doorway left, then right. Training. 22 years of it. Your body moves before your brain finishes waking up, and that was fine because your brain was 3 seconds behind, and 3 seconds was a long time in the dark. The shop was wrecked. The figures were gone. The gravel lot showed tire tracks leading toward the county road, fresh and deep, a heavy vehicle moving fast without headlights. They had driven dark. Standard evasion. "Ranger!" The barking stopped. Silence. 2 seconds. 3. Then the sound of paws on gravel, fast, coming from the east side of the property where the drainage ditch ran along the fence line. Ranger came around the corner of the building at a dead run, legs covered in mud from the ditch, chest wet, but whole, uninjured. Moving with the focused intensity of a dog who had been separated from his person and was correcting that problem at maximum speed. He hit Caleb at the knees, not jumping, pressing, confirming. Then he circled him twice, fast, tight circles, before running the perimeter of the yard. North fence, east gate, south tree line, west wall. 3 complete circuits. The same route he ran every morning, but at triple speed, checking every point, confirming every corner, reclaiming territory that had been violated. He came back and sat at Caleb's feet, breathing hard, eyes clear, waiting. Good boy. Good. You're all right. Caleb ran his hands over the dog's body. No cuts, no tenderness, no chemical burns, no signs of tranquilizer. Whoever had opened the gate had let the dog out, nothing more. The distinction mattered. Harming the dog would have been personal. Letting him out was professional. A calculated separation, which meant the people who did this were not amateurs and not emotional. They were efficient, hired. The shop was destroyed, not structurally, functionally. The torch head was cracked. The regulator assembly needed full replacement. The grinder's cord was cut clean, 1 slice, wire cutters, professional. The welding leads were tangled, deliberately, knotted, which took time and suggested the second person had been thorough rather than rushed. The table was bent at the base. 2 to 3 days of cleanup, $400 in replacement parts. Nothing was stolen. No cash taken from the lockbox on the shelf. No tools missing from the racks. The targets were specific. The instruments of Caleb's livelihood, and the drawer where something important might have been stored. The message was not ambiguous. Stop looking. Go back to welding gate posts. Caleb checked the truck. The toolbox in the bed was padlocked. He opened it. The flash drive was inside, sealed in its waterproof case, tucked between a socket set and a roll of electrical tape. He had put it there 2 days ago, after copying the contents onto June's laptop. Habit. ASWCC Coxon kept backup navigation charts in a separate location from the primary. If the primary bridge station was destroyed, you steered from the backup. If the backup was destroyed, you steered by memory. You always had a third option. Mac had understood that principle. The flash drive existed because Mac had thought like a sailor to the end. Caleb closed the toolbox, locked it, called June at 2:34 a.m. She answered on the second ring. She had not been sleeping either. June, the shop was hit. What? Are you? I'm fine. Ranger's fine. Break-in. 2 people. Professional. They trashed the shop and opened the gate to separate the dog. I need you to check the archive first thing Monday morning. See if the files we pulled are still accessible. Caleb. Margaret called me yesterday afternoon. She said the county is reorganizing the archive. The records we accessed, the shipping permits, the property transfers, the barge logs. They're being moved to restricted storage. Effective Monday. County Administrator's Office. Institutional access only. No public requests. Moved where? Under lock. Margaret's office. Which means Garrett Lyle's client. Which means Garrett Lyle. I can't get to them anymore. Caleb sat on the tailgate of his truck. 2:38 a.m., Saturday night into Sunday morning. The shop behind him was wrecked. The archive files were being locked away by the system that had generated them. The manifest was still in the bridge, but the bridge was Pace's estate, which was Garrett Lyle's jurisdiction until the 30-day window closed. The evidence he had spent 5 days assembling was being dismantled, piece by piece, by a network that had operated successfully for 15 years and was not going to stop because a welder and an archivist had pulled some old boxes. Ranger jumped up onto the tailgate beside him. The dog's body was still damp from the ditch, mud on his legs, water in his coat, the smell of clay and standing water. He leaned against Caleb's side, 80 pounds of weight that did not ask permission and did not apologize for the mud. Caleb looked at the shop, at the overturned table inside, at the scattered tools, at the dark interior of a space he had built with his own hands over 3 years. The welding bench, the tool racks, the creeper with the missing wheel. Every piece represented a choice he had made after leaving the Navy. To work with his hands, to keep his head down, to build something small and controllable in a world that had proven itself neither. Now, someone had walked into that space and torn it apart in 3 minutes. And the person behind it was a dead man. Wesley Pace could not be confronted, could not be arrested, could not be made to sit in a room and answer questions. He had died of heart failure in a comfortable house paid for with stolen artifacts, and the only justice available was the kind that would cost the living more than the dead. He thought about stopping. For nearly a minute, he sat on that tailgate and let the possibility settle. That the right thing to do was nothing. That the dead were dead, and the evidence was paper, and the town had scholarships and a park and a library wing, and that maybe the cost of truth was higher than anyone was willing to pay. Mac was gone. Pace was gone. The only people who would bleed when the truth came out were people who had done nothing wrong. Students on scholarship, kids in the park, June with her chapter and her reputation, and Caleb himself, who had spent 11 years building a quiet life that was now in pieces on a shop floor. He sat with it. He let the weight of doing nothing press down against the weight of the mud-covered dog leaning into his side, and the flash drive locked in the toolbox 3 feet away, and the wrench on the kitchen table, and the journal entry that ended with a line Caleb could not stop hearing. He said, "Go through the chain." I did. The chain is the problem. Mac had not stopped. At 26 years old, facing a commanding officer who had told him twice to stand down, Mac had not stopped. He had documented. He had photographed. He had recorded. He had built his own backup because the system he was supposed to trust had turned out to be the system he was supposed to survive. And he had not survived it. But the evidence had. Because Mac had been the kind of sailor who thought further ahead than the men trying to kill him. Stopping now meant Mac died for nothing. Not once. Twice. Caleb stood. Not yet. He went inside, sat at the kitchen table, Mac's wrench was still there, chrome, catching the light from the yard floods. He picked up his phone. The flash drive was in the toolbox. The copies were on June's laptop and June's phone. The photographs of the county records were on June's camera roll. 41 images, backed up to her cloud account. The system had taken the originals. But the system did not know about the copies, because the copies existed in the only places the system could not reach. In the hands of two people who had already decided the truth was worth the cost. Caleb had one more call to make. Not tonight. In the morning. A number he had not dialed in 3 years, belonging to a man named Ty Bascombe. Former Petty Officer First Class, SWCC, Special Boat Team 20. They had served 6 deployments together. Ty had left the Navy 2 years after Caleb and gone into private maritime security. He kept his contacts, he kept his clearances, and he kept his word, because that was how boat crews worked. You did not lose a man's trust because time passed. You lost it because you earned it. Caleb set Mac's wrench down on the table, aligned it with the edge. A small act of order in a night that had none. He went to bed. Ranger followed. The dog curled on the floor beside the bed, nose pointed toward the door, ears twitching at every sound the damaged shop made as it settled into its new, broken shape. Neither of them slept, but this time it was not grief that kept them awake. It was planning. He made the call at 7:15 Sunday morning. Ty Bascombe answered on the 3rd ring. Background noise, wind, engine, open water. Ty was on a boat somewhere. Of course he was. Some men left the Navy and never touched salt water again. Ty had left the Navy and bought a 40-foot patrol vessel and spent his days running maritime security contracts off the Gulf Coast. Different employer, same ocean. Ty, it's Caleb. Senior Chief. The voice was the same. Deeper, maybe. Slower. But the cadence had not changed. Ty Bascombe spoke the way he drove boats. Steady throttle. No wasted movement. Course correction small and early. 3 years. I was starting to think you'd gone full hermit. Close. You all right? No. I need your help. Go ahead, Caleb told him. Not everything. The relevant pieces. The bridge. The compartment. The manifest. Mac's journal. The audio recording. Pace's voice saying handled with the inflection of a man discussing a maintenance schedule. He told it in order, factual, the way you deliver an after-action report. Timeline, observations, evidence, conclusions. He did not editorialize. He did not need to. Ty listened without interrupting. When Caleb finished, the line was quiet for 6 seconds. The engine noise continued. The water continued. Somewhere, a gull called. Mac. You're telling me the commander killed Mac? The commander arranged it. The evidence supports that conclusion. What do you need? NCIS. Someone who will take this seriously and move fast. I've got copies of everything, but the originals are in a bridge that's part of an estate controlled by an attorney who is actively destroying the paper trail. I know a guy. Special Agent Cold Case and Fraud Section, NCIS Southeast. Name's Whalen. He handles cases involving retired personnel. I'll call him today. He'll want to see what you have before he opens anything official. I can send the flash drive contents encrypted. Do that. I'll text you a secure upload link in an hour. Caleb? Yeah. Mac would have called me too, if he'd had the chance. I know. Hoo-yah, Senior Chief. Hoo-yah. The call ended. Caleb set the phone on the kitchen table beside Mac's wrench. Two objects. One that connected him to the dead. One that connected him to the living. Both pointed in the same direction. Within the hour, Ty texted a link. Caleb uploaded the flash drive contents through the encrypted portal, watching the progress bar fill on his phone screen while he sat at the kitchen table. The upload completed at 8:41 a.m. 23 image files, 4 document scans, 1 audio recording, 1 journal scan, 57 megabytes. The entire evidence file of a 7-year smuggling operation and a murder, compressed into a data packet smaller than a 3-minute song. He received a confirmation text from Ty 20 minutes later. Waylon has it, reviewing. Expects to have preliminary assessment by Tuesday. Preserve all originals. Preserve all originals. Standard evidence protocol. The crates were still in the bridge. The manifest was in the bridge. Mac's journal and dog tags were in the crate. The bridge was Pace's estate, which Caleb had not yet formally accepted, which meant it was still under Garrett Lyle's legal authority. If Lyle discovered that the compartment had been opened and the contents documented, he could move to secure the bridge under estate administration, lock it down, and delay access until the evidence deteriorated or the 30-day window expired and the trust took possession. Caleb needed to act before Lyle did. Not with force, with timing. Ranger was in the yard, not circling, sitting at the gate that had been opened 2 nights ago by men who wanted Caleb to stop. He sat facing outward, body aligned with the opening, as if he had taken personal responsibility for ensuring it would not happen again. His ears moved in quarter turns, sampling the sounds of the road, the field beyond, the tree line. He was not anxious. He was on post. Good man. Caleb went back inside. He had 2 days. The town meeting was Thursday. He had checked the schedule at the municipal building on his way back from the bridge. 3rd Thursday of every month. Open session, 7 p.m. Public comment period at the end. Anyone could speak. The agenda was posted online and in the lobby of the municipal building, and no one had ever, in the history of Corbin Bend, used the public comment period for anything more dramatic than a complaint about road paving. That was about to change. He spent Sunday and Monday preparing. Not the evidence. The evidence was ready. Mac had done that work 11 years ago. What Caleb prepared was the delivery. How to stand in front of a room full of people who believed Wesley Pace was their greatest benefactor and tell them, with documents and photographs and the recorded voice of a dead man, that their benefactor was a thief and a murderer. Sunday. He organized the materials the way he had organized mission briefs on the boats. Timeline along the left column. Evidence in the center. Conclusions on the right. No emotion in the structure. The emotion was in the facts. The facts did not need help from his voice or his face or any performance of outrage. They only needed to be presented in order and allowed to land. He printed photographs from the flash drive at the library's public printer on Monday afternoon. The librarian watched him feed paper into the machine without comment. 23 images, selected for clarity and relevance. He mounted them on poster board with spray adhesive from the hardware store, numbered in sequence with a black marker. He printed the key manifest pages. He printed June's photographs of the county records, enlarged to readable size. The shipping dates circled in red marker, so they could be seen from the back of a 60-seat room. He loaded the audio file onto his phone, tested it with a portable speaker he borrowed from the hardware store owner, who asked what it was for and accepted presentation as a sufficient answer. The audio played clearly at medium volume. Pace's voice filled the shop, calm and authoritative, discussing shipping routes and cylinder seals, and a dead sailor's curiosity, with the inflection of a man reviewing quarterly reports. Caleb played it once. Then he turned it off and sat in the quiet for a long time. Monday evening, June came to the shop. She stood in the doorway and looked at the damage from the break-in. The table was upright now, bent but functional. The tools were back on the racks. The torch was still broken. She did not comment on any of it. She looked at the poster boards laid out across the floor in a line that ran from the shop door to the back wall. 23 images and a dozen pages of documentation arranged in the order Caleb intended to present them. "You're really doing this." Thursday, at the town meeting. Public comment period. June crossed her arms, looked at the photographs, at the manifest pages, at the timeline Caleb had written on a sheet of butcher paper taped to the wall. Garrett will be there. I'm counting on it. What do you need from me? Your testimony. You verified the county records, the barge permits, the property transfers, the company filings. If I present and they question the sources, you confirm. I'll be there. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I wrote the chapter that made him a saint. I'm going to be in the room when the correction gets read. Ranger walked past both of them and lay down on the poster board showing the bridge photograph. His body covered half the image. His chin rested on the west pier. Neither Caleb nor June moved him. Thursday, 7 p.m. Corbin Bend Municipal Building, 2nd and Elm. The building was brick, 2 stories, built in 1952 with WPA money, and a plaque near the entrance that no one read anymore. The meeting room on the first floor held 60 chairs arranged in rows facing a raised platform with a single table and 3 microphones. The chairs were molded plastic, the kind that stuck to your legs in summer and squeaked against the floor when you shifted. The air conditioning was set to 68 degrees, which meant it would reach 72 by the time the room filled. Because municipal air conditioning in Alabama in late May was not a solution, it was a negotiation. Caleb arrived at 6:40 with Ranger and a cardboard box containing the poster boards, the printed documents, and the portable speaker. He wore a clean shirt, dark blue, the one he wore to the hardware store and the bank, and nowhere else. His boots were the same boots he always wore. You did not change your boots for a presentation. Your boots were the only honest part of any outfit. Ranger walked beside him without a leash. The dog entered the municipal building through the glass double doors, assessed the meeting room in a single sweep of his head, left to right, ceiling to floor, and sat beside the chair Caleb chose in the second row. Not the front. The front was for people who wanted to be seen arriving. The second row was for people who intended to be heard when it mattered. The room filled. 40, then 50, then 62 people, some standing along the walls. Small town. Word traveled. Someone had heard that the welder who inherited Pace's bridge was going to speak at public comment. The someone had told someone else. By Thursday afternoon, Corbin Bend knew that something was going to happen at the meeting, even if no one knew what. Garrett Lyle sat in the front row, arms crossed, suit jacket buttoned. He had not spoken to Caleb since the shop visit. He sat with the composure of a man who had prepared for multiple outcomes and was confident in all of them. June sat in the fourth row, near the aisle. She carried a folder with printed copies of her photographs. Her pencil was in her pocket. Her hands were in her lap. The regular business took 45 minutes. Budget review, road maintenance update, a discussion about the recycling schedule that lasted longer than it should have. Caleb sat through all of it. Ranger lay beside his chair, head on his paws, eyes tracking the room with the passive attention of a dog who had decided that the current environment was boring but worth monitoring. At 7:47 p.m., the chairwoman opened public comment. Any members of the public wishing to address the commission? Caleb stood. Ranger stood with him. He walked to the front of the room, set the box on the table, removed the poster boards, arranged them in sequence along the front edge of the platform, leaning them against the table legs. 23 photographs, manifest pages, county records, timeline. The room was quiet. Not the quiet of anticipation, the quiet of confusion. People did not bring poster boards to public comment. People complained about potholes and asked about water bills. This was different, and the room could feel it. My name is Caleb Dunn. I'm a retired Senior Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewman. I served 22 years. I currently own and operate Dunn Metalworks on County Road 14. He paused, not for effect, for breath. 3 weeks ago, I was informed that Colonel Wesley Pace, United States Navy retired, had named me as sole beneficiary of his estate. The estate included 3 properties, a financial account, and the Chapel Bridge south of town. The room shifted. Pace's name had weight in this room. It occupied space. Caleb could feel the weight adjust as he continued. The inheritance included a condition. The bridge was to be maintained as is. No modifications, no third-party inspections. I found that condition unusual, so I inspected the bridge myself. He pointed to the first poster board, the bridge, the west pier, the welded panel. Inside the west pier, I discovered a sealed compartment, not part of the original 1903 construction, added sometime after 2006, based on the weld technique and materials. Second board, photographs of the crates, the cylinder seals, the pottery fragments. The compartment contained stolen Iraqi antiquities, cylinder seals, pottery, stone figures, looted from Iraqi cultural sites during the post-2003 conflict, transported via military logistics channels from Iraq through a Gulf Coast port to this river corridor, stored in properties Colonel Pace purchased along the route. Third board, the manifest, transit dates, origin points. This is a handwritten manifest documenting 17 shipments between 2006 and 2013. The transit dates match barge arrivals documented in Corbin Bend County shipping permits. He looked at Garrett Lyle. The attorney had uncrossed his arms. His hands were on his knees. His face had not changed, but his hands had, and hands were harder to control than faces. The barge company, Southern Corridor Logistics, is registered with the Alabama Secretary of State. Its registered agent is Garrett Lyle. The room turned toward Lyle, not all at once, in pieces, heads rotating, eyes shifting. The sound of 62 people recalibrating their understanding of the man in the front row. Lyle did not stand. He did not speak. He sat. The manifest's final entry is dated September 14th, 2013. Caleb's voice did not change pitch or volume. The training held. You deliver the brief. You present the facts. The facts do the work. It reads, Rourke flagged. Handle. He let the words land. Petty Officer First Class Mackenzie Rourke was a member of my crew at Special Boat Team 20. He discovered the smuggling operation and reported it to his commanding officer, Commander Wesley Pace. 19 days after that manifest entry, Petty Officer Rourke was killed during an extraction mission on the Shat al-Arab waterway in Iraq. The official report listed hostile fire. No enemy combatants were recovered. No shell casings were found. The room was silent, not confused silence, comprehension silence. The kind that happens when a large number of people arrive at the same conclusion simultaneously and have not yet decided what to do with it. Caleb reached into the box, removed the portable speaker, connected his phone. This is an audio recording made by Petty Officer Rourke before his death. He pressed play. Pace's voice filled the room, calm, authoritative, discussing shipping dates and buyers and quantities with a civilian who spoke about cylinder seals and Basra lots and a market in New York. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The conversation moved at the pace of a business meeting. Routine. Professional. Then the civilian's voice. And the senior chief's boy? The one asking questions? Pace's voice. Unchanged. Unhurried. Handled. Handled how? Handled. Don't ask again. The recording ended. The speaker hissed briefly, then silence. Caleb looked at the room, at the faces, at the understanding that was settling across them in real time. He could see it happen. It moved across the rows the way a wave moves across water. Not uniformly, not simultaneously, but in a connected sequence that began at the front and reached the back wall within seconds. Some faces were angry, not at Caleb, at the realization that they had been part of something without knowing it. That every scholarship check, every park bench, every library book purchased with Pace's donations had been purchased with stolen property. Some faces were grieving, not for Pace, for the version of the town they had believed in, the version where a retired colonel's generosity was simple and clean and required nothing in return except gratitude. Some faces were calculating, working through the implications. The scholarships would be reviewed. The park donations might be clawed back. Property values along the river corridor, where Pace's holdings were now crime scenes, would drop. The tax base would shrink. The county budget, which had relied on Pace's properties as assessed value anchors, would need revision. And some faces were looking at Garrett Lyle. Not with accusation, with the worst thing, reassessment. Lyle stood. His composure had held through the manifest, through the photographs, through the transit dates and the property records and the timeline on butcher paper. It had not held through the audio. His face was pale. His hands were on the back of the chair in front of him, gripping the plastic. The tremor in his fingers was visible from the second row. This is defamation. His voice was controlled, but the control was visible, which meant it was failing. The colonel used military logistics to smuggle stolen antiquities through this river for 7 years. Caleb's voice cut clean across Lyle's. Not shouting, not raised, leveled. And when a 26-year-old sailor discovered it and reported it through the chain of command, the colonel arranged his death. June stood. 4th row, near the aisle. She held her folder. I'm June Harwell, County Archivist. I verified the shipping permits and property transfers Mr. Dunn referenced. The county records corroborate the manifest dates. I photographed 41 pages of supporting documentation before those records were moved to restricted storage by the county administrator's office last Monday. The room turned again, this time toward the commission table, where Margaret Holm, county administrator, sat with a glass of water she had not touched. Garrett Lyle looked at Caleb, at June, at the poster boards, at the room full of people who were no longer his audience. You have no idea what you've done. Yeah, I do. I contacted the Naval Criminal Investigative Service on Sunday. They have copies of everything you've seen tonight and everything you haven't. A special agent from the Southeast office will be here tomorrow morning. Lyle's face went through one more change. Not anger, not fear, recognition. The recognition of a man who had built a defense around an assumption, and the assumption was that the evidence was local, containable, manageable through county channels and administrative reclassifications and nighttime visits to welding shops. The assumption was wrong. The evidence was already federal. He sat down. He did not speak again. The parking lot afterward, 9:14 p.m. The municipal building's fluorescent lights cast long rectangles across the asphalt. Cars pulling out slowly, headlights sweeping across the building's brick facade. Conversations in clusters. Some people left quickly. Some stood in the warm night air and talked in low voices about what they had just heard. Garrett Lyle walked to his sedan alone. His jacket was unbuttoned now, his tie loosened. He passed within 10 feet of Caleb, who stood beside his truck with Ranger sitting at his left heel. Lyle stopped. For a moment, neither man spoke. The parking lot sounds continued around them. Doors closing, engines starting, the distant hiss of tires on the county road. That scholarship fund is the only reason half these kids go to college. His voice was quiet, not threatening, not defensive. Tired. You think they care where the money came from? They will now. He wasn't all bad done. The good he did was real. So was Mac. Lyle nodded once, not agreement, acknowledgement. He walked to his car. The door closed. The engine started. The sedan pulled out of the lot and turned south on Main Street, and Caleb watched it go. June appeared beside him, not close, a few feet away. She held her folder against her chest. Her face was composed, but her eyes were red at the edges. You all right? I'm standing. What happens to the chapter I wrote? You rewrite it. What happens to the town? The town existed before Pace. It'll exist after. June nodded, looked at Ranger. The dog was watching the parking lot empty with the same passive attention he had maintained all evening. Monitoring, present, unimpressed by the drama of human accountability. Thank you for not doing this alone. I didn't have a choice. You had the records. That's not what I meant. I know. She walked to her car. Caleb watched her pull out. The parking lot was nearly empty now. The municipal building's lights clicked off section by section, a janitor working through the rooms. The night was warm and still, and smelled like asphalt and cut grass, and the river somewhere beyond the tree line. Ranger sneezed. Once. Loud. The sound broke the silence clean in half. Caleb looked down at the dog. The dog looked up at him. His tail swept the asphalt once. Yeah, let's go. NCIS Special Agent Whalen arrived at 8:30 Friday morning in a government sedan with Virginia plates. He was 46, compact, wearing a blue polo shirt and khakis that looked like they had been ironed by someone who understood that presentation mattered, even in field work. He shook Caleb's hand at the gravel apron beside the bridge. Firm grip, steady eyes. The manner of someone who had heard a lot of stories and had learned to listen to all of them before deciding which ones were true. Senior Chief Dunn. Agent Whalen. Bascombe said you'd be direct. He was right. Show me. Caleb walked him onto the bridge. Ranger followed. The dog walked the full span this time without hesitation. Whelan noticed that, but did not comment. At the West Pier, Caleb showed him the compartment. The crates, still inside, undisturbed since Caleb had last closed them. Whelan crouched at the opening. He examined the weld work on the panel, examined the marine sealant on the interior walls, examined the crates without opening them, noting the construction, the lock, the combination that matched the date a sailor had died. Then he opened the first crate. The cylinder seals, the pottery, the manifest. He photographed each item in situ before touching it. He wore nitrile gloves from a box in his jacket pocket. The gloves were the same shade of blue as the ones the Cultural Affairs officer had worn in Basra in 2007, when Caleb's crew had interdicted the barge. Different officer, different decade. Same gloves, same kind of crime. Whelan opened the second crate. Mac's dog tags, the journal, the flash drive. He held the tags for a moment longer than necessary. Then he set them down, precisely where they had been, and continued documenting. When they finished, Whelan stood at the West Pier and looked out at the river. The morning light was on the water, bright and moving, catching the current in shifting patterns that looked like language if you watched long enough. We'll need the crates, the manifest, the journal, and the flash drive as evidence. I can issue a preservation order today. They're yours. The county records that were moved to restricted storage. We'll subpoena those as well. County Administrator's Office doesn't have authority to withhold documents from a federal investigation. Good. Senior Chief, this is going to take time. Investigations like this don't resolve in weeks. They resolve in months, sometimes years. The colonel is deceased. NCIS can investigate, but criminal charges against a dead man don't proceed through the courts. What we can do is establish the record, document the full scope of the operation, refer the smuggling network to the FBI for prosecution of any living participants, and formally amend Petty Officer Rourke's service record if the evidence supports reclassification of his death. Reclassification from hostile fire to line of duty death under suspicious circumstances. It changes the official record. It changes what the Navy says happened to him. It's not a murder conviction. I won't pretend it is, but it puts the truth in the file permanently. Mac deserved better than a file. He did. But the file is what we can give him, and it matters. It matters to the record. It matters to the family if they ever want to see it. And it matters to every sailor who reads it and understands that the Navy corrected what the Navy got wrong. That's where it belongs. Whelan nodded, looked at the bridge one more time, then at Ranger, who was standing at the east end of the deck, 10 feet on, in the same position he had held since the second visit. Your dog won't come further? He's been coming further every day. Whelan regarded the dog for a moment. Then he walked back to his sedan to make calls. 3 weeks later, the bridge was cordoned. Yellow evidence tape across both approaches, which the wind kept pulling loose, and which someone from the county kept reattaching with fresh strips every few days. A small act of civic diligence that continued even though the reason for the tape was the opposite of civic. NCIS had removed the crates, the manifest, the journal, and the flash drive on the second day of the investigation. A forensic team had spent 4 hours inside the compartment, documenting dimensions, taking samples of the marine sealant, photographing tool marks on the interior iron. They had found trace evidence consistent with additional crates that had been stored and subsequently removed over the years. The compartment had held more than 2 boxes. It had held a rotating inventory. The investigation expanded. FBI joined on day 5, taking over the smuggling network, while NCIS handled the military personnel aspect. 2 of Pace's river properties were searched under federal warrant. One contained a barn with a concealed basement that held packing materials, acid-free tissue, and foam cutouts matching the dimensions of antiquities described in the manifest. The Southern Corridor Logistics Company was dissolved. David Struther, the operations manager, was located in Pensacola and brought in for questioning. He cooperated. That was Tuesday of the second week. By Friday, the network diagram had expanded to include a broker in New York, a shipping agent in Kuwait, and a retired logistics officer living in Tuscaloosa who had facilitated the military side routing. Corbin Bend adjusted. Not quickly, not easily. The way a body adjusts to a wound, first the shock, then the inflammation, then the slow, uneven process of deciding what to do with the scar. The Pace Community Scholarship was suspended pending investigation. 14 students currently receiving funds were notified by letter. The county scrambled to identify bridge funding from alternative sources. Some families were angry at Caleb. He knew that. He heard about it the way you hear about weather in a small town. Indirectly, through second-hand reports and altered greetings at the hardware store. The woman who ran the cafe on 2nd Street stopped making eye contact. The man at the gas station started. The plaque at Riverside Park was removed by the county grounds crew on a Tuesday morning, while 3 people watched, and one of them cried. The granite base remained, a blank rectangle in the grass that held the ghost of a name. The library wing kept its designation because no one could agree on what to replace it with, and in the absence of consensus, the name stayed. That was how most lies survived, Caleb thought. Not because anyone defended them, because replacing them required agreement, and agreement was harder than silence. Garrett Lyle closed his office on a Friday. The brass plate was removed. The limestone building stood empty on Main Street, its windows dark, its door locked with a deadbolt that no one had a key to. Caleb drove past it every time he went to town. He did not stop. He did not look longer than necessary. Lyle's role in the network was being investigated. The man was not a villain. He was an enabler. The distinction mattered legally. It did not matter much otherwise. June began rewriting her chapter. She worked at her desk in the archive basement, surrounded by the same boxes and the same fluorescent hum, writing a version of the county history that included the parts she had missed the first time. She told Caleb once, standing in the shop doorway while he straightened the welding table, that the new chapter was harder to write. Not because the truth was complicated, because she had to explain how the lie had worked so well for so long. And that explanation required admitting that she had been part of its success. The shop reopened on a Monday. Caleb replaced the torch regulator, bought a new grinder cord, straightened the table base with a hydraulic jack and a piece of channel iron. The work took a day and a half. The first customer after the reopening was a woman from the next county who needed a trailer hitch welded. She did not know about the bridge, or the colonel, or the town meeting. She needed a hitch. Caleb welded it. She paid in cash. He wrote the receipt by hand on the carbon copy pad. That was Tuesday. On Wednesday, he drove to the bridge. The evidence tape was still there, fluttering in a warm wind that came off the river, smelling of mud and rain from somewhere upstream. The NCIS markers were still on the pier, small orange flags on wire stakes that vibrated in the breeze. But the cordoned area ended at the west pier. The deck itself was open. Caleb parked at the gravel apron, the same gravel apron where he had parked on the first day, when the bridge was a dead man's eccentric condition, and the dog's refusal was a mystery, and the weld seam on the west pier was just a detail that did not fit. 3 weeks. 21 days between the phone call from Garrett Lyle's office and this moment, standing beside his truck in the late May heat, looking at a bridge that had held a secret for 15 years, and a dog that had known something was wrong before any of the humans did. Caleb stepped out, opened the passenger door. Ranger jumped down, stood beside the truck, looked at the bridge. His ears were forward. His body was still. But there was no tension in his posture, no resistance, no assessment. He was not deciding. He had already decided. Whenever you're ready. The dog looked at him, brown eyes, steady. Then he walked forward, past the gravel apron, past the east end of the deck where he had sat for a week, 4 feet planted, refusing to advance, past the 10-foot mark where he had stopped on the second visit, earning ground by inches. Past the halfway point, where the arch reached its peak and the river was visible through the gaps in the decking, brown water moving 200 feet below. He walked the full span, 400 feet. His paws clicked on the wood decking, steady and even, the rhythm of an animal who had made a decision and did not intend to revisit it. He did not stop. He did not slow. He did not look back at Caleb to check permission or seek reassurance. He walked to the west pier, turned once in a tight circle, and sat. Caleb followed. The walk felt different from this direction. Shorter, clearer. The bridge did not creak. The iron did not protest. The structure held, as it had held for over 100 years, carrying weight it had not been designed for, and bearing it without complaint. They stood together at the west pier. The compartment was empty and open, the panel removed by NCIS. The iron arch rose above them, rust-colored against the blue of a late May sky. The river moved below. Brown water carrying branches and foam and whatever else the current had collected from upstream, moving it south, moving it away. Caleb reached into his jacket pocket. Mac's dog tags, the paracord chain, the stamped metal that listed a name and a blood type, and nothing else about the man it identified. He placed the tags on the top rail of the arch. The iron was warm from the sun. The tags sat there, metal on metal, glinting in the light. The wind moved them slightly. They did not fall. They know now, Mac. It's in the file. Ranger stood beside him. The dog did not look at the tags. He looked at the river. His ears were forward, his body still, his breathing even. Present, not waiting, not remembering, just there, on a bridge he had refused to cross, standing in the place where the truth had been sealed and was now open. Caleb turned, walked back to the east end. Ranger followed. No hesitation, no looking back. They walked the 400 feet together, their steps falling into a rhythm that was not synchronized, but was coordinated. The way two beings who have lived alongside each other long enough develop a shared cadence without trying. At the truck, Caleb opened the passenger door. Ranger jumped in, turned once on the seat, then lay down on his side, belly exposed, one paw extended, the posture of total vulnerability and total trust. His eyes half closed, his breathing slowed. Caleb got in, started the engine, looked at the bridge one more time in the rearview mirror, the iron arch, the river, the yellow tape fluttering in the wind. Mac's dog tags on the rail, too small to see from this distance, but there, present, holding their position. He pulled onto the county road. The truck moved south toward town. The bridge got smaller behind them. Ranger's paw twitched once. Dreaming or settling. Caleb did not know the difference, and it did not matter. The shop opened at 7.